Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kalnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Politics with Sam and Anne, the podcast that gives you everything you need to arm you for the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes.
Hello there, my name's Sam Coates from Sky News. With me is Anne McElvoy from Politico. It's Wednesday, March the 5th. Donald Trump's yo-yoing over President Zelensky continues overnight, but there comes a point where a British political podcast, you have to leave Donald to the US and focus what matters to us.
And that is the upcoming spring statement, a huge moment looming for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and for the government. It is 3 weeks today that's going on, and we have lots on the plan around that at the moment.
You call it the spring statement, and I'm going to call it the grim statement for all sorts of reasons that I'm going to lay out in just a moment.
Oy, that's awful. I'll just keep going. Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, may or may not help Rachel Reeves when he appears before the Treasury Select Committee at 2:30. And everywhere you look in the papers, you see stories about creaking public services. All of that to come. But first, Sam, do you want to give us a quick update on the overnight stuff?
Yeah, just a few bullet points on global affairs before we get to the domestic stuff. 24 hours ago, we were discussing how Donald Trump had pulled all the assistance to Ukraine. A little after 3:30 p.m. UK time yesterday, President Zelensky wrote a grovelling social media post and a letter to Donald Trump, executing a huge U-turn and giving Donald exactly what he wants, saying he regretted Friday's bust up in the White House and wants peace now. Huge change. So overnight, Donald Trump told Congress all sides are ready to sign that minerals deal, and Ukraine and Russia are ready for peace. But Donald Trump hasn't resumed arms shipments to Ukraine despite British pressure. John Healey will go to Washington this week. Meanwhile, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Sweden and Denmark could join Britain and France as members of the coalition of the willing to help in Ukraine post-peace deal, even though nobody knows what any kind of peacekeeping force would entail and what it would look like.
Keir Starmer will be at the dispatch box at PMQs today, but he won't be going to the big European summit tomorrow. There will, however, be more big announcements coming about European defence and aid. And Merz and his future coalition partners want to exempt a large portion of defence spending from the very strict German fiscal rules. And that's going to be a really fascinating moment because it is the point when we see Germany stepping up there for the first time and really taking off those spending corsets. I wonder whether some in the UK will be saying, hey, maybe Rachel Reeves could just do that. But that would, of course, be pretty tricky for her within her rules.
I'm chancellors who borrow a bit too much. Maybe there's a theme. Look, to be honest, I don't want to zoom too far away from the central mission of this podcast, which is domestic politics. So let's leave Ukraine and global affairs there for today, because it's not actually what's going on in large parts of government as far as I can see. Right. Inside government, the work that is going on is preparations for the very tricky moment of the spring statement, which is 3 weeks today. And it's occupying a lot of headspace in number 10, as well as in the Treasury, to try and soften what looks like it's going to be quite a big blow. And it is worrying them because what I'm about to lay out over the next few minutes is they are planning in the next 3 weeks an absolute blizzard of announcement to kind of try and haze us all that they're very, very pro-growth and it's all going to be all right. And the reason for that is the numbers when we get to the 26th of March are still, as far as they know, and they're not finalised, are looking very grim. And I've got a lot of new facts this morning. Well, certainly they're new to me, and apologies to anybody who's covered them together already. But I think they're new on this podcast. But the one big one is the kind of one that sets out the context and why it's all so difficult. If you remember in October, in the budget then, Anne, Rachel Reeves set herself very tough limits on borrowing. She confirmed them in the budget. And she can't borrow for day-to-day spending from 2029. Fair enough. I mean, she's got to reduce the amount that this government borrows. But she also spent right up to the limit and borrowed right up to the limit, leaving herself historically low, what's known as headroom, just under £10 billion. And since then, growth has been worse, borrowing costs have been higher, all of which mean that she's going to have to do more borrowing than she predicted in October, but she's got almost no room before she breaches her fiscal rules. Right. So the context was always that she feared that she may have breached the borrowing rules when the Office of Budget Responsibility issued their report on the 26th. But I've learned it's going to be even more tricky than that, because it's not like Rachel Reeves thinks she can just plough through that buffer. The Treasury believes that the minimum headroom that they've got to have at the end of this process will still have to be £10 billion or so. You know, that's historically low as it is. You can't just allow that headroom to be eroded away by higher borrowing because of lower growth and higher borrowing costs. So in other words, for every billion of additional borrowing that the OBR thinks she's going to have to do, taking a closer or over her limit, they're going to have to find spending cuts, possibly welfare cuts, in order to net that off. So it's not the case that she's got £10 billion before there's a problem. She's got no £1 billion before she starts having to find public spending cuts from bits of Whitehall, from bits of the state, because they don't want the headroom to get any smaller than it is at the moment. And apologies, that's quite a techie fact, but it's a hugely complicating reality that the Treasury is facing up to today.
I like no £1 billion as your bottom line there, Sam. Sam is around, everyone, to help with A-level economics homework, just to get in touch. But absolutely, you make the point there, I think, very well and colourfully when you lay out how many pressures are coming on Rachel Reeves at once. Those tight constraints, yes, self-created, but that is what the government says it wants to be judged by in terms of its fiscal discipline. The rising pressure on public finances, global uncertainty, as we heard in Donald Trump's State of the Union speech, and also, is he also to an extent a part of that with those tariffs coming down the line, where I think a lot of other countries are worried that will also have an effect on them. And also, just Britain is always a little bit different, and we're seeing a trend in the Eurozone countries where I've been recently. They're quite happy, their inflation is coming down. Ours looks stuck, or at least on the last reading there in January was stuck at 3%. So it does look as if that headroom, as you point out, is narrowing considerably. The cost of servicing the debt is part of that. Then there's the made in Britain problem, that growth is still limping along, as well as all those other factors. I bet Rachel Reeves, Sam, she must be quite envious of Friedrich Merz just saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to create another big fund and spend from that. But of course, German debt is considerably lower, so he can maybe allow himself that. That is something the UK government has decided it can't allow itself.
Absolutely not. It's quite interesting that Rachel Reeves' problems are not just don't just require Rachel Reeves' solutions, and I have actually noticed this over the last few weeks that Downing Street is fully invested in making Rachel Reeves look good at all points, whether it's on defence spending, whether it's on the general government narrative. Number 10 is absolutely doing everything it can to sort of improve Rachel Reeves' standing, because she's had a much rockier time than anyone expected. The numbers are the numbers. The path of what happened is the path of what's happened. She's good in the Commoners' chamber, but the fundamentals aren't great. But number 10 are very invested in her, because I'd be interested in what you think, but I don't think there can be any division between Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, because if something hurts Rachel Reeves, it just hurts Keir Starmer as well, because he's subcontracted so much to her.
I think that's right, and we're seeing that very much an attempt to go in lockstep, to the extent that sometimes you just feel that Keir Starmer is trying to be a protective shield even before Rachel Reeves has started saying something. I don't know if you felt this a bit, Simon, as well. And he gave an answer to a question recently which I thought was really telling, when he said, well, this isn't going to be a big event. It was like, I don't know, we'll be the judge of that. Yeah. Of course, they're very, very anxious to say this is not in any way main budget, but you've laid it out yourself, and I think you could come on to some aspects of it in a moment. But yes, it is a big event. Whether you call it a budget, if it quacks like at least a big mini budget, then that's what it is. But absolutely, Keir Starmer, their Praetorian Guard, he feels whatever happens to Rachel Reeves will reflect back on him.
I think it's going to be an enormous moment in March. There isn't going to be tax rises. I think that what separates a spring statement from a budget are fiscal measures, and there aren't going to be fiscal measures in terms of tax rises. But I think it's going to absolutely obliterate all to come, and the next few weeks of politics, providing that the rest of the world doesn't get in the way first. I just want to lay out some of the other things I've been hearing. So what I've learned is they're trying to make it not feel like a big event, in the sense that they are creating a whole load of other moments in the run up to March the 26th, almost to sort of a lot of tall poppies to make sure that the tallest poppy of all doesn't look too exposed. It's quite a clever tactic.
I like the poppy plan, the poppy strategy.
Yes, it is. And it's a 4-point strategy, as far as I can tell. So it's a 4-point plan that, as far as I can tell, is going to dominate the next 3 weeks in the lead up to the spring statement. So the first building block is the planning bill, which is coming next week. Now, the planning bill is absolutely key to getting growth and building and infrastructure building and housing building. And it's been the subject of really intense arguments behind the scenes in Whitehall. And it either will or won't allow this government to do the kind of planning it says it and building that it says it wants to do, that has bedeviled and not been possible under previous governments. So is the planning bill, authored by Angela Rayner and Matt Pennycook, tough enough? We find out next week, and that is a huge moment. I hear from some people it's not quite as good as they hoped, but we will only know for certain when we see the colour of its money, and the success or failure of that, I think, is critical to Keir Starmer fulfilling so many of his promises. The second building block of this strategy, and I didn't know this, but I picked it up from a few people, is that there is going to be a big announcement about Whitehall cuts and possibly even Whitehall restructuring. Somebody in the last few days used the phrase machinery of government change to me. I don't know whether that's stuff that we'll see or not see on the outside, but what it does, I think, involve is a big reduction that they want to tell us about to the number of civil servants and people working in Whitehall, right? That is one of the ways they're going to signal they're getting costs under control. Big reductions in civil servants. And I've heard that before. I have heard that a lot of times before. And percentage reductions to civil servant headcount need to be examined with a massive magnifying glass, because natural wastage, hiring freezes, rather than sackings, Americans, the Elon Musk style, is probably far more likely on the cards. But that's the second pillar of their plan. The third pillar of their plan also borrows a bit from the kind of stuff that you're hearing from the US overnight. And it's that Keir Starmer is going to have, and they've got a phrase for it in Whitehall, Keir Starmer's going to have a red tape moment. God, what a horrible expression. And that's where Keir Starmer is going to very publicly kill some bits of regulation that he thinks are holding back growth. It's something he's talked about with Donald Trump, and now he's going to talk to the British public about it. But they're planning in Whitehall, they're all government departments having to offer up regulations for Keir Starmer to sacrifice at the altar of growth. And he will hope that gets things going and gets all the attention, rather than is Rachel Reeves going to miss her borrowing target. And then fourthly, welfare cuts. Now, there's going to be a long-awaited welfare green paper from the Work and Pension Secretary, Liz Kendall. About 5 weeks ago, I was confidently intoning on this on this podcast that there were not going to be welfare cuts that were going to be what's in the lingo scored, that were going to meaningfully help Rachel Reeves in this statement. That is now wrong. Right, there's been a change on that. Welfare cuts will be part of the package on the 26th of March in order to try and help her come within her borrowing limits. There was, I think, some pressure on Liz Kendall, and there was certainly some public briefing against her for not going further and fast enough. Anyway, she's changed position. There are going to be scored welfare cuts that are going to help Rachel hit her borrowing target. So 4 things: a 4-point plan, planning reform, Whitehall cuts, regulation cuts, welfare cuts. You heard it here first. And what do you make of all of that?
Well, you seem to have the entire spring statement, so we can all just go on holiday for the next 4 weeks. Oh, maybe not so fast. Absolutely fascinating. Just going through it quickly, I think on planning, you're right, there's an expectation of something really big and meaty, big moment there for Angela Rayner, who is going to have to front that up. And that is the moment, however, when she really does confront this NIMBY versus YIMBY argument all over the country. Not everyone is going to love the implications of that. I've always thought that that is going to be a drama that is going to kick off at some point. Let's see if that is now. But yeah, absolutely, it is what business wants. It wants something very clear and big on planning. Is it going to be big enough for them, but not so big that it has everybody wondering if they're going to have some massive infrastructure thing in their backyard? On Whitehall cutting, I mean, I was probably smiling when you were talking, if you were wondering why. Is it for my sins? I sat on the Institute for Government Future of Government Machinery Commission just before the election.
To be clear, Anne, that's a lot of sins.
That is a lot of sin. That is quite a lot of sins. And this was quite sort of nitty gritty stuff about the machinery of government, from which I also learnt a lot. And one of the things I've sort of picked up since is all of those long kind of protocols and files and investigations have been very carefully studied by this new team. And as you know, Sam, they're beefing up that number 10 team all the time, bringing in a lot more kind of Blairite or Blairish kind of officials. So it does, I must say, when I did it, I have to say I was a bit sceptical. I thought it was really interesting and headed perhaps for the sort of, we'll do that in the fourth term kind of stuff. But, slightly to my surprise, it does look as if this is now really going to happen. So it's interesting that you've been...
Is the report public?
You've been briefed on this.
Is the report public? Is the report public?
Yes.
If you could send me
a summary. Yeah, there is a summary from the Institute, the excellent Institute for Government. It has that.
Okay. Well, I might tweet that in a bit so people can see what the conclusions were.
Exactly. Have a look at where they got to, and Hannah White, excellent chair. I'm sure you'd be able to find it quite easily by looking at that. And then finally, sorry, I should just get back to welfare cuts, because I do think all of those things that we've talked about important, but welfare cuts, I think, is going to be defining for this government. Many Labour MPs already feeling tested and sore about the persistence on that cap on the two-child policy as the limit for access to universal credit and child tax credit. This is going to cut deep, and it is going to do some damage, and the government is going to have to explain why and stand up for the consequences. And all of that talk, if you remember, about cruel Tories and welfare cuts, is going to come bouncing back on a Labour government. My prediction.
And I think if there's a sense that it's being rushed because there's a problem with the numbers, and there's a sort of gap in this black hole, effectively, in Rachel Reeves' plans, that will make Labour MPs unnerved. Two just big picture political reflections. What's going on here is that this government, at the spring statement, is going to announce it can't meet all the manifesto promises it made in last year's manifesto. It's going to have to. It's already broken some of them, like the aid promise. This spending review, along with the spring statement, is the moment where they go, we can't do it all, because they're going to blame the Tories, obviously. And that's the sort of the tough choices, refocusing around the plan for growth is a thing. But manifesto promise breaching is approaching us. I've had that from cabinet ministers, and that is huge. And that's what they're sort of happy to say in public. That the bit that you get in private from some cabinet ministers is, no. What's going on here is that Rachel Reeves is keeping her manifesto promises by making her cabinet colleagues break theirs. So some secretaries of state are losing out so that she can keep hers. Now, there's a political argument about whether that's the right set of priorities. Labour needs to go further to prove its fiscal discipline. Nevertheless, I've had it more than once. The politics of this government is protecting Rachel by sacrificing others, coming back to our earlier point. And so the kind of way that this government is going about things is trying to pretend it would have done all of that 4-point plan anyway, regardless of the black hole. That's not true, but that's the way they're going to present it. And it strikes me that Rachel's promises And there is a debate behind the scenes about it. And Mervyn King, talking to Sophie Ridge, kind of supercharged that last week, questioning Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules and the wisdom of her going for that. Rachel Reeves' decisions and the need to protect her feels like it's starting to bend lots of other things in government out of shape. And let's just see what that does to Rachel Reeves' reputation internally. Her stock is very high at the moment, but she's under quite a lot of pressure in private. And that, by the way, is the alarm, so you're going to have to be quick.
I'm going to be very quick and just say I think it's going to be one of those verbs that you decline. You break a promise. I am flexible and agile in the face of changing events.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And that was a great end to the week. We'll see you in 24 hours' time for the last Politics with Salmon and of the week. See you then.
Bye.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.